The 3500 from Fractal Design brings that simplistic Scandinavian appeal with easy to work in internals, great airflow and storage potential, and comes in both the windowed or plain side panels for your preference. Hey guys, Dmitry here with Hardware Canucks, and Eber, who is one of our reviewers here on the channel, has been editing on his aging XPS 15 laptop, and he was obviously frustrated with the overall performance of the laptop not being able to keep up with the demands of efficient and productive editing workflow. So he saved up some money and he decided to go all out with some drool-inducing parts, and this being his first ever build, we thought we'd share this experience with you so you can follow along and see how we put this super project production workstation together. So let's check out the parts. Now for the processor, he chose the Intel Core i7-4930K, a monster 6-core chip with a relatively affordable price point compared to Xeon CPUs, and of course hyperthreading is a big plus for applications like Premiere and After Effects. It also has a crazy amount of overclocking potential. To house this chip, we've got the Asus X79 Deluxe motherboard. It is considered one of the best in the class for reliability and expansion, and it's one of the few boards that was actually in his budget. For the CPU cooler, the Corsair H100i is fully capable of keeping the 4930K under control, especially since overclocking is coming to town. Now for RAM, he'd gone ahead with the Corsair Vengeance quad-channel 64GB kit clocked at 1866 MHz, and while it seems like a complete overkill, it would be for a gaming machine, but this will seriously help with 3D animations in After Effects and any video editing software that we throw at it. Now for storage, a 256GB Samsung 840 Pro SSD is plenty to house operating system and all of his applications with excellent read-write performance and also proven reliability. Now for the GPU, the part he was most excited about, he's opted for the reference NVIDIA GTX 780 Ti. This is an absolute powerhouse for gaming in ultra settings with potential to push proper 4K gaming when of course paired in SLI. Now the real advantage of editing here is CUDA acceleration in Premiere and After Effects, and for anyone who has worked with Adobe before would know the massive performance boost you get when taking advantage of the power of the GPU. And to power this whole build, we have the Corsair AX860. It's a fully modular unit with nice low-profile black cables that will contribute to clean cable management. And finally, to house all these parts, we hooked him up with the Phanteks Anthu Lux. If you haven't seen our review of this case yet, we definitely suggest you check it out, as it is an outstanding chassis. Now the building process was straightforward. We started with the processor installation, making sure you align the arrow on the chip with the arrow in the socket, and it drops right in without any pressure. Next are all the sticks of RAM, all 8 of them. Align the module accordingly with the slots and give them a slight press and you are good to go. Followed by a quick installation of the rear I/O shield and mounting the motherboard inside the case carefully with the included screws, and we are ready for installation of the CPU cooler. Now installing the liquid cooling kit was simple. You just have to make sure you take your time to appropriately align the fans with the radiator and secure it up top. Next is the power supply, very straightforward, just pop that in, secure it with thumb screws, and we are ready for the best part. Installing the GPU does require removing appropriate PCI brackets at the back of the case. Align the GPU with the PCI Express lane on the motherboard, giving a light press, and the GTX 780 Ti is all ready to go. And lastly, the SSD was installed on one of the rear brackets attached behind the motherboard tray, perfectly within reach for all the SATA cables. Now cable routing and management in the Anthu Lux is an absolute breeze. Plug in the 24-pin and the 8-pin into your motherboard and the PCI Express cables into your graphics card, and we did spend some time cleaning things up in the main chamber for best possible looks and of course unrestricted airflow, and the Super Project production workstation is ready for its first boot. And so now on to Eber with his final setup and his thoughts and some benchmarks of this dream machine compared to what he had before with the XPS 15. Let's take a look.
So now onto the performance portion of this video. First, I want to see the performance difference between this new machine and my XPS 15, especially with an overclocked 4930K at 4.5 GHz. I was excited to see how this workstation upgrade would stack up in the benchmarks. Starting with Geekbench 64-bit test, the new rig scored a little over 24,000 on the multi-threaded test and just over 4,000 on the single-core test, which is ridiculously closer to the 8-core Xeon processors from Intel, while the XPS 15 scored around 3 to 4 times less. Now on to Cinebench R15. For the OpenCL test, my rig scored almost 110 frames per second, while the XPS 15 scored around 30 frames per second with its outdated GT 540M GPU. The CPU test was the highlight for this benchmark, as the 4930K scored around 1200 points, whereas the Core i7 quad-core processor gave a lower 362 points. Absolutely astounding. Moving on to Unigine Valley benchmark, the new machine averaged at 63 frames per second on ultra settings at 1200p, with a total score of around 2700 points. The XPS 15 on the other hand scored significantly less with an average of 13.3 frames per second at 1200p and a score of 557 points, jaw-dropping results from the GTX 780 Ti. I also ran the Luxmark OpenCL benchmark and my rig scored around 2400 points, whereas the XPS 15 outputted a lower 107 points. Now I know that synthetic benchmarks wouldn't really paint the entire picture, so I ran the CS6 CUDA benchmark with a total render time of the 3D ray tracing composition in 3 minutes, whereas it took over 40 minutes on the XPS 15. Again, thanks to those CUDA cores on the GTX 780 Ti and the 64GB RAM kit. I also took one of our earlier review videos and rendered the entire sequence with the After Effects composition in under 6 minutes, whereas the XPS 15 took an hour and 5 minutes to render this 5-minute review video. So now you can see how fast 6-core 4930K crushes through render times in Premiere Pro. So at the end of the day, the total price for this upgrade was around $3,000, and while the XPS 15 served me well to edit up to this point, this was definitely a needed investment to speed up my render times and boost my productivity workflow. So what do you guys think? Did I make the right choice in terms of parts, and what would you have done differently given such a budget? Again, thanks for joining us on this super project adventure. Give us a like if you enjoyed the build log, subscribe for more similar content, and we'll see you in the next one.